Om Hari Om. Om Sahana Bhavatu. Sahano Bhunaktu. Saha Viryam Karava Vahai. Tejasvina Aditamastu. Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti. 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 Om. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto thee, unto us, and to all your beloved children everywhere. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday evening reading and discussion of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, a fascinating document, to say the very least, one of a kind. Nothing else is like it in the scriptural heritage of the world, but being the direct words of what many believe is an incarnation of God. So with that, I will ask Irma to tell us where we are in the book and to begin.
Sure, Brother Shankara. Good evening and namaste, everybody. We are on page 71, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the PDF, but you may have to subtract a few pages for the regular book. I think 7 or 8 pages, if I remember right. And we're starting at last days at Kausipur. That's where we're going to begin.
This was the last chapter of the Master's incarnation in his physical form. He said he would remain with us in his subtle form for 200 years and then take birth again. Those were his promise. That was his promise that he communicated to Holy Mother, Vivekananda, and others. So we're in that process of his being with us in his subtle body. And many have encountered him in that way. So please begin, dear.
Sure, Brother Shankara. When Sri Ramakrishna's illness showed signs of aggravation, the devotees, following the advice of Dr. Sarkar, rented a spacious garden house at Kausipur in the northern suburbs of Calcutta. The Master was removed to this place on December 11th, 1885. It was at Kausipur that the curtain fell on the varied activities of the Master's life on the physical plane. His soul lingered in the body 8 months more. It was the period of his great passion, a constant crucifixion of the body, and the triumphant revelation of the soul. Here, one sees the humanity and divinity of the Master passing and repassing across a thin borderline. Every minute of those 8 months was suffused with the touching tenderness of heart and breathtaking elevation of spirit.
Unknown caller.
Can't talk now, I'm in class.
Every word he uttered was full of pathos and sublimity. It took the group only a few days to become adjusted to the new environment. The Holy Mother assisted Sri Ramakrishna's niece, Lakshmi Devi, and a few women devotees took charge of the cooking for the Master and his attendants. Surendra willingly bore the major portion of the expenses, and other householders contributing according to their means. 12 disciples were constant attendants of the Master. Narendra, Rakhav, Baburam, Niranjan, Yogin, Latu, Tarak, the elder Gopal, Kali, Sashi, Sharath, and the younger Gopal. Sharada, Harish, Hari, Gangadhar, and Tulasi visited the Master from time to time and practiced the sadhana at home. Narendra, preparing for his law examination, brought his books to the garden house in order to continue his studies during the infrequent spare moments. He encouraged his brother disciples to intensify their meditation, scriptural studies, and other spiritual disciplines. They all forgot their relatives and their worldly duties. Among the attendants, Sashi was the embodiment of service. He did not practice meditation, japa, or any of the other disciplines followed by his brother devotees. He was convinced that service to the Guru was the only religion for him. He forgot food and rest and was ever ready at the Master's bedside. Pandit Shashadhar one day suggested to the Master that the latter could remove the illness by concentrating his mind on the throat, the scriptures having declared that yogis had a power to cure themselves in that way. The Master rebuked the Pandit. For a scholar like you to make such a proposal, he said, how can I withdraw the mind from the lotus feet of God and turn it to this worthless cage of flesh and blood? For our sake at least, begged Narendra and the other disciples. But, replied Sri Ramakrishna, do you think I enjoy this suffering? I wish to recover, but that depends on the mother. A few hours later, the Master said to Narendra, I said to her, Mother, I cannot swallow food because of my pain. Make it possible for me to eat a little. She pointed you all out to me and said, what? You're eating enough through all these mouths. Isn't that so? I was ashamed and could not utter another word. This dashed all the hopes of the devotees for the Master's recovery. I shall make the whole thing public before I go, the Master had said some time before. On January 1st, 1886, he felt better and came down to the garden for a little stroll. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Some 30 lay disciples were in the hall or sitting about under the trees. Sri Ramakrishna said to Girish, well, Girish, what have you seen in me that you proclaim me before everybody as an incarnation of God? Girish was not the man to be taken by surprise. He knelt before the Master and said with folded hands, what can an insignificant person like myself say about the one whose glory even sages like Vyasa and Valmiki could not adequately measure? The Master was profoundly moved. He said, what more shall I say? I bless you all. Be illumined. He fell into a spiritual mood. Hearing these words, the devotees, one and all, became overwhelmed with emotion. They rushed to him and fell at his feet. He touched them all, and each received an appropriate benediction. Each of them, at the touch of the Master, experienced ineffable bliss. Some laughed, some wept, some sat down to meditate, some began to pray. Some saw light, some had visions of their chosen ideals, and some felt within their bodies the rush of spiritual power. Narendra, consumed with a terrific fever for realization, complained to the master that all the others had attained peace and that he alone was dissatisfied. The master asked what he wanted. Narendra begged for samadhi so that he might altogether forget the world for 3 or 4 days at a time. You are a fool, the master rebuked him. There is a state even higher than that. Isn't it who you sing? All that exists art thou? First of all, settle your family affairs and then come to me. You will experience a state even higher than samadhi. The master did not hide the fact that he wished to make Narendra his spiritual heir. Narendra was to continue the work after Sri Ramakrishna's passing. Sri Ramakrishna said to him, I leave these young men in your charge. See that they develop their spirituality and do not return home. One day he asked the boys, in preparation for a monastic life, to beg their food from door to door without thought of caste. They hailed the master's order and went out with begging bowls. A few days later, he gave the ochre cloth of the sannyasi to each of them, including Girish, who was now second to none in his spirit of renunciation. Thus, the master himself laid the foundation of the future Ramakrishna order of monks. Sri Ramakrishna was sinking day by day. His diet was reduced to a minimum, and he found it almost impossible to swallow. He whispered to M, I'm bearing all this cheerfully, for otherwise you would be weeping. If you all say that it is better that the body should go rather than suffer this torture, I am willing. The next morning, he said to his depressed disciples seated near the bed, do you know what I see? I see that God alone has become everything. Men and animals are only frameworks covered with skin, and it is He who is moving through their heads and limbs. I see that it is God Himself who has become the block, the executioner, and the victim for the sacrifice. He fainted with emotion. Regaining partial consciousness, he said, now I have no pain. I'm very well. Looking at Latu, he said, there sits Latu, resting his head on the palm of his hand. To me, it is the Lord who is seated in that posture. The words were tender and touching. Like a mother, he caressed Narendra and Rako, gently stroking their faces. He said in a half whisper to M, had this body been allowed to last a little longer, many more souls would have been illumined. He paused a moment and then said, but Mother has ordained otherwise. She will take me away last, finding me guileless and foolish. People should take advantage of me and persuade me to bestow on them the rare gifts of spirituality. A few minutes later, he touched his chest and said, here are two beings. One is she, and the other is her devotee. It is latter who broke his arm, and it is he again who is now ill. Do you understand me? After a pause, he added, alas, to whom shall I tell all this? Who will understand me? Pain, he consoled them again, is unavoidable as long as there is a body. the Lord takes on the body for the sake of his devotees. Yet one is not sure whether the master's soul actually was tortured by this agonizing disease. At least during his moments of spiritual exaltation, which became almost constant during the closing days of his life on earth, he lost all consciousness of the body, of illness and suffering. One of his attendants said later on, while Sri Ramakrishna lay sick, he never actually suffered pain. He would often say, "Oh mind, forget the body, forget the sickness, and remain merged in bliss." No, he did not really suffer. At times, he would be in a state when the thrill of joy was clearly manifested in his body. Even when he could not speak, he would let us know in some way that there was no suffering. And this fact was clearly evident to all who watched him. People who did not understand him thought that his suffering was very great. What spiritual joy he transmitted to us at that time. Could such a thing have been possible if he had been suffering physically? It was during this period that he taught us again these truths. Brahman is always unattached. The three gunas are in it, but it's unaffected by them. Just as the wind carries odor, yet remains odorless. Brahman is infinite being, infinite wisdom, infinite bliss. In it, there exists no delusion, no misery, no disease, no death, no growth, no decay. The transcendental being and the being within are one and the same. There is one indivisible, absolute existence. The Holy Mother secretly went to Shiva temple across the Ganges to intercede with the deity for the master's recovery. In a revelation, she was told to prepare herself for the inevitable end. One day when Narendra was on the ground floor, meditating, the master was lying awake in his bed upstairs. In the depths of his meditation, Narendra felt as though a lamp were burning at the back of his head. Suddenly, he lost consciousness. It was the end for all-effacing experience of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, when the embodied soul realizes its unity with the Absolute. After a very long time, he regained partial consciousness but was unable to find his body. He could see only his head. "Where's my body?" he cried. The elder Gopal entered the room and said, "Why, it's here, Naren." But Narendra could not find it. Gopal, frightened, ran upstairs to the master. Sri Ramakrishna only said, "Let him stay that way for a time. He has worried me long enough." After another long period, Narendra regained full consciousness. Bathed in peace, he went to the master, who said, "Now the mother has shown you everything, but this revelation will remain under lock and key, and I shall keep the key. When you have accomplished the mother's work, you will find the treasure again." Some days later, Narendra being alone with the master, Sri Ramakrishna looked at him and went into samadhi. Narendra felt the penetration of a subtle force and lost all outer consciousness. Regaining presently the normal mood, he found the master weeping. Sri Ramakrishna said to him, "Today I have given you my all, and I'm now only a poor fakir, possessing nothing. By this power, you will do immense good in the world, and not until it is accomplished will you return. Henceforth, the master lived in the disciple. Doubt, however, dies hard. After 1 or 2 days, Narendra said to himself, if in the midst of this racking physical pain, he declares his Godhead, then only shall I accept him, incarnation of God. He was alone by the bedside of the master. It was a passing thought, but the master smiled. Gathering his remaining strength, he distinctly said, he who was Rama and Krishna is now in this body, Ramakrishna, but not in your Vedantic sense. Narendra was stricken with shame. That's the end of that subheading, Brother Shankara. Any comments you want to, any description, purport?
Well, I just think it's interesting to note
Very much.
that the next time that he had now become Vivekananda, he was in Thousand Island Park in New York with some of the devotees that he'd brought there for training. And he went into that state of nirvikalpa samadhi again. This was the fulfillment of the master's promise. When your work is finished, you will regain this state and you may leave. That is to say, leave the body. Well, Narendra did not. Vivekananda did not. He stayed with us from 1895 to 1902. And during that period of time, he fulfilled what he called his mission to the West. And our mission here in Atlanta is part of that fulfillment. Swami Yogeshananda did what he did as part of the fulfillment of the Master's mission transmitted through Vivekananda. And so that continues to this very day. This very class is part of that. So welcome to this class in that spirit. You are hearing the Master's precious words of promise to us that he will transmit to us through his own and through others, his own powers and the powers of others, the spiritual life, the spiritual energy necessary to sustain ourselves as spiritual aspirants during these days which we are promised are our last incarnation, our last embodiment. So any comments or questions from anyone else about any of that?
Right here where it says, henceforth the master lived in the disciple. So after that point, was Swamiji aware of the master literally living in his body?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It would have been unsustainable as a way of living if he had been aware of it at every moment. He himself wrote about this. You can find it most notably in two places. First of all, his short talk called My Master, and in his letters to his brother devotees.
You know, I don't really know how to say this, but I had a kind of a revelation or experience. I was meditating on on Swami Sarvadevananda's name and some of the things that he had said to me about not having a will and being the machine and Sri Ramakrishna being the operator. And I've heard these things. I just wasn't understanding how literal it was. But he literally became Sri Ramakrishna, like literally like a vessel or a vehicle and then what he was telling me about it flows down, like through the different little lion heads and dragon heads on the gutter of like a Chinese, building. And I just wasn't understanding how literal that is.
Literal it is, yes. Thou art the operator, I am thy machine.
And
There
so
is only one consciousness.
the question arose in my mind, is there such, if time, space, and all that means nothing to the guru, then is there we talk about chronologically, direct disciples, but is there really such a thing as an indirect disciple?
An indirect disciple.
Meaning that when you take initiation, like from Swami Sarvadevananda, it is literally Sri Ramakrishna that touches you.
Yes, exactly. So there may be people who are given a grace of that touch without the intercession of a guru, a face of the eternal teacher. But that doesn't need to concern us. Whether or not that happens, it's between them and the teacher. So the thing for us to do is focus on, what does it mean? Thou art the operator, I am thy machine. I am the machine, thou art the operator. Is there a phenomenal reality? It certainly does appear so. Here we sit. How can this be so? It can only be so by the will of the operator of the machine. We are given this sense, this experience that there is a phenomenal reality, because that's what the operator of the machine wants us to experience. Clearly, otherwise it would not be so. I mean, just using the rules of logic. Does that make any sense at all, Bhagavantas?
Yeah, I was just kind of wanting to make sure that, some to kind of have validate that a little bit, and because sometimes you kind of doubt your own, these things that come to you.
Of course we do. The doubt itself, the doubt and fear itself is part of the machine's operation. We don't know black unless we know white. We don't know evil unless we know good. We don't know assuredness unless we know doubt and fear. So we live in this realm of Maya, of opposites, of duality. And so if it weren't a reality for us, we wouldn't be having this conversation tonight. There would be no reason for us to read this book. If we were already on the other side of that, if we were, in other words, established in samadhi. And that too will happen, we're assured, at exactly the right time, if not before you depart this body, at the moment that you do leave this body, that will happen. This is the promise that is made to us over and over by the Ramakrishna Order Swamis. I've heard it from every one of the faces of the eternal teacher. Swami Prabhupada, Swami Swahananda, Swami Sarvadevananda, and for that matter, others, Yogatmananda and so on. So we have nothing to fear, but we experience doubt and fear. Anything else from anyone? All right, dear, please read on.
Yeah. Next subheading is Mahasamadhi. Sunday, August 15th, 1886. The master's pulse became irregular. The devotee stood by the bedside. Toward dusk, Sri Ramakrishna had difficulty in breathing. A short time afterwards, he complained of hunger. A little liquid food was put into his mouth. Some of it he swallowed, and the rest ran over his chin. 2 attendants began to fan him. All at once, he went into samadhi of a rather unusual type. The body became stiff. Shashi burst into tears. But after midnight, the master revived. He was now very hungry and helped himself to a bowl of porridge. He said he was strong again. He sat up against 5 or 6 pillows, which were supported by the body of Shashi, who was fanning him. Narendra took his feet on his lap and began to rub them. Again and again, the master repeated to him, "Take care of these boys." Then he asked to lie down. 3 times in ringing tones, he cried the name of Kali, his life's beloved, and lay back. At 2 minutes past 1, there was a low sound in his throat, and he fell a little to one side. A thrill passed over his body. His hair stood on end. His eyes became fixed on the tip of his nose. His face was lighted with a smile. The final ecstasy began. It was Mahasamadhi, total absorption, from which his mind never returned. Narendra, unable to bear it, ran downstairs. Dr. Sarkar arrived the following noon and pronounced that life had departed not more than half an hour before. At 5 o'clock, the master's body was brought downstairs, laid on a cot, dressed in ochre cloths, and decorated with sandal paste and flowers. A procession was formed. The passers-by wept as the body was taken to the cremation ground at the Baranagore Ghat on the Ganges. While the devotees were returning to the garden house, carrying the urn with the sacred ashes, a calm resignation came to their souls, and they cried, "Victory unto the Guru." The Holy Mother was weeping in her room, not for her husband, but because she felt that Mother Kali had left her. As she was about to put off the marks of a Hindu widow, in a moment of revelation, she heard the words of faith, "I have only passed from one room to another."
Now, this was the master speaking to her. She was going to do those things that a Hindu widow does, which was shave her head and tear the border from her dhoti, so that her dhoti would be only white and have no red border. When she began to do these things, the master appeared to her and said, "What are you doing? I am not dead. I have only moved from one room to another." And there he remains. For us, he is in that next room, just in that next room. And you may ask any of the senior swamis of the Ramakrishna order, have you had an experience of this? Do you believe this to be true? And listen very carefully to their answer. I would recommend that Bhagavan does. Ask Sarvadevananda. Anything else from anyone? How are we doing for time?
Oh, we still have a lot of 24 minutes left.
Good, good, good. Okay. If there's nothing else from anyone, then we can read on.
Next subchapter is Master and Disciple, February 1882. It's about M's first visit to the Master.
Ah, this is fascinating. Master and disciple. The disciple now, of course, is the one spoken of now is M himself, Mahendranath Gupta, the one who transcribed all these notes that later became the gospel. And this tells us of his first meeting with the Master, which is one of the more remarkable incidents in spiritual literature.
It was on a Sunday in spring, a few days after Sri Ramakrishna's birthday, that M met him the first time. Sri Ramakrishna lived at the Kalibari, the temple garden of Mother Kali, on the bank of the Ganges at Dakshineshwar. M, being at leisure on Sundays, had gone with his friend Sidhu to visit several gardens at Barnagore. As they were walking in Prasanna Banerjee's garden, Sidhu said, "There is a charming place on the bank of the Ganges where a Paramahamsa lives. Should you like to go there?" M assented, and they started immediately for the Dakshineshwar temple garden. They arrived at the main gate at dusk and went straight to Sri Ramakrishna's room. And there they found him seated on a wooden couch facing the east.
Notice it's dusk, and they found Sri Ramakrishna facing the east. Both of these things are significant in terms of spiritual practice. Dusk is one of the most auspicious times for spiritual practice, and it is most auspicious to face the east. So both of these conditions are fulfilled. It's a remarkable thing. There is no such thing as coincidence. So this was meant to be the experience that M had. At dusk on this day, he found the Master seated facing the east. Please go ahead, dear.
With a smile on his face, he was talking of God. The room was full of people, all seated on the floor, drinking in his words in deep silence. M stood there speechless and looked on. It was as if he were standing where all the holy places met, and as if Sukadeva himself were speaking the word of God, or as if Sri Chaitanya were singing the name and glories of the Lord in Puri with Ramananda, Swarup, and the other devotees. Next, formalities and essentials of religion. Sri Ramakrishna said, when hearing the name of Hari or Rama once, you shed tears and your hands and your hair stands on end, then you may know for certain that you do not have to perform such devotions as the Sandhya anymore. Then only will you have a right to renounce rituals, or rather rituals will drop away of themselves. Then it will be enough if you repeat only the name of Rama or Hari or even simply Om. Continuing, he said, the Sanja merges in the Gayatri and the Gayatri merges in Om. M looked around with wonder and said to himself, what a beautiful place, what a charming man. How beautiful his words are. I have no wish to move from this spot. After a few minutes, he thought, let me see the place first, then I'll come back here and sit down. As he left the room with Sidhu, he heard the sweet music of the evening service arising in the temple from gong, bell, drum, and cymbal. He could hear music from the Nahabat, too, at the south end of the garden. The sounds traveled over the Ganges, floating away and losing themselves in the distance. A soft spring wind was blowing, laden with the fragrance of flowers. The moon had just appeared. It was as if nature and man together were preparing for the evening worship. M and Sidhu visited the 12 Shiva temples, the Radhakanta temple, and the temple of Bhavatarani. And as M watched the services before the images, his heart was filled with joy. On the way back to Sri Ramakrishna's room, the two friends talked. Sidhu told M that the temple garden had been founded by Rani Rashmani. He said that God was worshipped there daily as Kali, Krishna, and Shiva, and that within the gates, sadhus and beggars were fed. When they reached Sri Ramakrishna's door again, they found it shut and Brinde, the maid, standing outside. Yam, who had been trained in English manners and would not enter a room without permission, asked her, is the holy man in? Brinde replied, yes, he is in the room. M, how long has he lived here? Brinde, oh, he has been here a long time. M, does he read many books? Brinde, books? Oh dear, no. They're all on his tongue. M had just finished his studies in college. It amazed him to hear that Sri Ramakrishna read no books. M, perhaps it's time for his evening worship. May we go into the room? Will you tell him we're anxious to see him? Brinde, go right in, children. Go in and sit down. Entering the room, they found Sri Ramakrishna alone, seated on the wooden couch. Incense had just been burned and all the doors were shut. As he entered, M, with folded hands, saluted the master. Then, at the master's bidding, he and Sidhu sat on the floor. Sri Ramakrishna asked them, where do you live? What's your occupation? Why have you come to Barnagar? M answered the questions, but he noticed that now and then the master seemed to become absent-minded. Later, he learned that this mood is called bhava, ecstasy. It is like the state of the angler who has been sitting with his rod. The fish comes and swallows the bait, and the float begins to tremble. The angler is on the alert. He grips the rod and watches the float steadily and eagerly. He will not speak to anyone. Such was the state of Sri Ramakrishna's mind. Later, Yam heard and himself noticed that Sri Ramakrishna would often go into this mood after dusk, sometimes becoming totally unconscious of the outer world. M, perhaps you want to perform your evening worship. In that case, may we take our leave? Sri Ramakrishna, still in ecstasy. No evening worship. No evening worship? No, it's not exactly that. After a little conversation, M saluted the master and took his leave. Come again, Sri Ramakrishna said. On his way home, M began to wonder, who is this serene-looking man who is drawing me back to him? Is it possible for a man to be great without being a scholar? How wonderful it is. I should like to see him again. He himself said, come again. I shall go tomorrow or the day after. That's the end of that subchapter, Brother Shankara. We will go to second visit next.
Yes, just one moment.
Okay, sure.
Just the parallels between this and the experience that Narendra had when he came. Of course, Narendra's was more powerful because the master greeted him so much more enthusiastically, knowing who he was, is, and why he had come. But the commandment, the request, come again, and that strange power, unable to resist coming again. Now, we too have been given that request. That's why we're here this evening. We have been asked by the Master, come again. Because it can't happen for most of us all at once. Some very few, having received the Master's touch, become established in Samadhi. But they're very rare indeed. This was the assertion of Swami Prabhupada. These aren't my words. So for most of us, we need to come again and again and again, as M came again and again and again, and many others, as we'll hear as we read on through this book, came again and again and again. Even Narendra came again and again and again. So it is our great grace and our great privilege and joy that we have this invitation. Because the Master never compels. The Master, there's no compulsion in the Master, only invitation. And so we accept the invitation if we are so inclined. And that inclination is part of the doing of the only doer, the operator of the machine. So everything, as Sri Ramakrishna says, happens at the right time. Any comments or questions or concerns from anyone?
There is a line here, is it possible for a man to be great without being a scholar? Which is true. They can be, a human being can be as great without being a scholar, right, Brother Shankara? That's what it says.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
To be.
I mean,
right.
Some of the Ramakrishna order Swamis are great scholars. Some of them not so much.
Okay.
You don't read so many books.
It's not the scholarly aspect of it, because there's plenty of scholars who are not great people.
Exactly.
It's
Yes.
But you can be a great without being a scholar, spiritually great. That's what
But you can be great in many ways without being a scholar.
Mm.
There have been, in recent times, for example, great mathematicians that somehow never studied math. Arithmetic, they didn't study. It just somehow came to them. Well, of course, we can say it's past life experience. But these are mysteries and we can look on them with wonder. But it needn't concern us too much. But thanks for remarking on it. Anything else from anyone?
Namaste, everybody. Namaste, Brother Shankara.
Yes, dear.
Just an amazing paragraph. It's out of the world. The description of the evening and the setting. I've read it and heard it so many times, and it's just mind blowing. Last year I went to Dakshineshwar in the evening. It's been a year now, and it's just everything just went in front of my eyes, and now the room is different. But it's just so amazing the way M has described the words, the moon coming up and the sound, it's vanishing in the distance, or the way it's worship, and it's just, for a devotional mind, all of us who are here, it's beautiful.
Yes.
There are no words to describe. I guess this is one of those experiences where we find peace and where we find solace and comfort and the beauty of something like this, which is real.
Yes, and in this context, it's good for us to remember that the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna was created by the direct will of Sri Ramakrishna. When once asked, "Who is this M?" he said, "Oh, he is but my instrument." And M was gathering all of these notes over these years. And when it came time for him to turn them into these originally 5 volumes that became the Gospel, Sri Ramakrishna actually appeared to him and stood by his elbow and helped him copy edit the book, saying, no, this isn't exactly how I said it. If you remember, I said it this way. So the gospel was created so that we could have exactly the experience that you just described. Shailesh. Comfort, solace. This quiet energy of spiritual fulfillment. Anything else from anyone?
Bhavandas, thank you so much for sharing that experience of what you had. That's amazing, of the machine and the operator. Thank you.
Yes. That was addressed to Bhagavan Das, yes?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Shailesh. But part of what I'm really working on, and I know these things can only come by grace, but it seems like by the time that you're really thinking about it and developing such a desire for it, it's really already a done deal. It's on its way. But, contemplating, not trying to ask the master to take away your will and to literally love everyone and to strip away the subjectivity that we put on people. I don't know, it really increased my understanding on an existential level of that. And also that that the proper respect that we should show to all the swamis, because they literally are the vehicle or are the machine of the master. And I don't know, it was just such a deep existential realization that it really was profound, even though I've heard all these things and understood them intellectually, but I don't know, I don't really know how to explain it.
Well, there is no explaining. And yes, you're right, the Swamis are the faces of the eternal teacher. That's what they become. They become that machine. But it isn't as if they give it a thought. They simply do the next right thing.
Yeah, I mean, because there for a little bit, I was hung up on trying to understand from the guru, or from, like, let's say Swami Sarvadevananda's perspective, how aware is he of this? And, does it enter into his consciousness or anything? And, I really think, when they say that, the machine, when he says to me that the machine has no will, he literally means no will. And so I just think it literally happens around them, and they just do what they do.
Exactly. They do the next right thing. They intuitively know what the next right thing is, and that's what they do. Are they perfect? Of course not. But they're much closer to perfect than we can ever imagine it being. Thank you, Bhagavan Das, as always. Anything else from anyone? Okay, how are we doing for time?
We have 4 minutes. I could just read a small subchapter here. Second
Sure.
visit M, and then we can close it there. Second visit. M's second visit to Sri Ramakrishna took place on the southeast veranda at 8 o'clock in the morning. The master was about to be shaved, the barber having just arrived. As the cold season still lingered, he had put on a moleskin shawl bordered with red. Seeing M, the master said, "So you have come. That's good. Sit down here." He was smiling. He stammered a little when he spoke. Sri Ramakrishna to M, "Where do you live?" M, "In Calcutta, sir." Sri Ramakrishna, "Where are you staying here?" M, "I'm at Barnagar at my older sister's Ishan Kaviraj's house." Sri Ramakrishna, "Oh, at Ishan's. Well, how is Keshav now?" "He was very ill." M, "Indeed, I have heard so too, but I believe he is well now." Master's love for Keshav. Sri Ramakrishna asked, "I made a vow to worship the mother with green coconut and sugar on Keshav's recovery. Sometimes in the early hours of the morning, I would wake up and cry before her, 'Mother, please make Keshav well again. If Keshav doesn't live, whom shall I talk with when I go to Calcutta?' And so it was that I resolved to offer her the green coconut and sugar. Tell me, do you know of a certain Mr. Cook who has come to Calcutta? Is it true that he is giving lectures? Once Keshav took me on a steamer, and this Mr. Cook too was in the party." M, "Yes, sir, I have heard something like that, but I have never been to his lectures. I don't know much about him." That's the end of this subchapter, second visit, Brother Shankara. We are almost only 1 minute time if you want
That's enough.
vote or comments.
Until next time. So, as you all know, it's so auspicious that we gather together this way. This undercurrent of togetherness, unity is powerful. It's what it means to study the art of spirituality together. We are together as we do this. And it is a joy. It is a great joy. So we'll close with that. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. And may we go forward, secure in the knowledge that we are in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our mother and father, who will look over us lovingly and support and nourish us. So until next time, which of course could be as early as tomorrow evening, may you all be well and in bright spirits. Any final thought from anyone? All right, dears.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma.